Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 10 worst conductors of music from the Romantic era. Well, we've covered the classical era. I think these are the only two we're going to do, honestly, because, Baroque cats. Because Baroque people tend to be specialists, and contemporary music people, well, they all do contemporary music pretty well. I don't know if there's anybody who plays 20th century music who absolutely bombs at it. I mean, makes a mess of it. So, they're just bad conductors out there. You do the 10 worst conductors. That's a different question, isn't it? But here we're being music specific. And here are the 10 winners of the Worst Conductors of Music from the Romantic Era Award. Number 1, Roger Norrington. Of course, because he's terrible at everything. And I know he just passed away. We should, rest in peace. We love him. Thank you. He sucks. And his romantic stuff particularly is a joke. I mean, it's just a joke. It's a farce. We know it. He knew it. We all know it. He was just trying to be provocative. Well, he succeeded. Now we can ignore it. Next, Denis Russel Davies. Now, Denis Russel Davies is an interesting case. He's really a contemporary music specialist. He has made splendid recordings of Philip Glass and Lou Harrison. And don't laugh. Philip Glass is not easy. And it's not bad music either. I've seen in the comments here, I mean, Glass seems to be a bête noire of so many people. He is a fantastic composer and a very interesting composer and one of the major voices in 20th century music. And I just don't understand what all the hostility is about. I don't get it. And Denis Russel Davies does beautiful work in music that does not require a great deal of, shall we say, emotional input from the conductor, but he's done so much more than that, and it's been dreadful. He did a whole Haydn symphony cycle. Don't forget. We all talk about the people who did complete Haydn symphonies. Well, Denis Russel Davies did it, and it was just unlistenably bad. I saw him conduct Prokofiev's Sixth Symphony. I'll never forget when he was with the Beethoven Orchestra Bonn. It was the most awful performance I've ever seen of anything. He has very little expressive investiture in music of the 19th century. It just seems to be the way it is. And if he's doing 20th century music, except for Prokofiev's Sixth, I mean, 20th century, not the late romantic style 20th century. Yeah, sure, he can do anything. I mean, he's a very talented guy, but he has his limitations. Next, oh gosh, definitely, for sure, John Eliot Gardiner. Now, Gardiner has done a good deal of romantic music, but most of it, his successful forays into romantic music, and I've said this a million times, have been choral works where he is the accompanist. He's done a lot of Berlioz. Remember, he was in Lyon for a while. He was in Hamburg for a while, very unsuccessfully, by the way. And he has never actually made an impression, I think, in romantic orchestral works. Could you imagine him doing Tchaikovsky? Oh God, no, not that. Anything but that. No. He's done a couple Brahms cycles that haven't been very good. He tried to do the Schumann symphonies a few times. They haven't been very good. It's as a personality. Romantic music requires that we talk about personality because that's what the music is often about, the personality of the composer or inviting the artist to contribute their own. Well, his personality is kind of sterile and nasty. I mean, that's what we've been told anyway. He's made fabulous opera recordings. He's done a lot of really good work. I don't want to trash the guy for that reason, but to go into later music where you have to just open yourself up to spontaneity and the emotion of the moment and all that, it's just not his fach. It really isn't. I mean, he did, for example, a very good Verdi Requiem. It's one of his better recordings in the Romantic era, but it's a choral work, and he handles choruses and soloists and whips them all into submission and gets very, very exciting results. But somehow I can't see him conducting Aida like Harnoncourt tried and failed dismally to do. He has his gifts. I don't believe romantic orchestral music is one of them. So there you go. Then we've got, oh yes, Christian Thielemann. Oh my God. Now, Thielemann, considers himself the second coming of, the universe in the German standard repertoire, which he conducts abysmally. He's done horrible Beethoven, horrible Bruckner, horrible Schumann. Even his Wagner operas are very good, but his orchestral excerpts, terrible, horrible Richard Strauss. He is a slovenly, I don't even know how to describe it, rhythmless, flaccid, shapeless pudding of a conductor. And in, even romantic music that has a lot of wiggle room, like Richard Strauss, requires a certain amount of firmness of shaping and rhythm that he seems singularly unwilling or unable to provide. I have seen him do wonderful work, again, in the opera house. But we are talking about conductors when they are the focus of attention, not the singers, the staging, the chorus, the other things that he's done. And his Bruckner cycle recently was just terrible. Anyway, he's definitely one of the worst. Next, Teodor Currentzis, of course. Now, some people were very excited when for example, he did Mahler 6, he did Tchaikovsky's Pathetique, he did things like that. And people were impressed with the degree of discipline that he was able to inculcate in his orchestra up there in the permafrost after 75,000 billion trillion rehearsals. And so he created something of a cult about himself. But he is one of those egomaniacal micromanagers. And quite frankly, if you gave me an orchestra and 6 months to rehearse them, I could learn how to conduct and conduct an amazing performance, or disciplined performance, of whatever the piece happens to be. And he did that for a couple things. But his Beethoven was just terrible, over-controlled, and bereft of any kind of spontaneity or genuine excitement. Everything was pre-programmed in. And, his career seems to be in a nosedive since his patrons were, the Russian state, and stuff happened there, you may have noticed. So who knows what he's doing now? I don't know. He was in Stuttgart. I don't see what's going on there. And I just find that whole, afflatus that surrounds these people to be totally off-putting. And it's reflected in their performances, which are people talked about those incredible Mozart operas. Well, he was running Gulag Mozart. These people, every single note and every single aspect of it was thought out and executed to the nth degree of precision. But my gosh, there was no music there. No music at all. And he did make some good records back before he was like a thing. For Alpha, he did a good Shostakovich 14th. He did a Mozart Requiem, and it wasn't too bad, if I recall. He made a Tchaikovsky violin concerto with that nutjob violinist, what's her name, Kopachinskaya or something like that. It was just, oof. So he's, at best, incredibly inconsistent. And you might think he'd be good for romantic music because he's like an egomaniacal loon, like so many of those romantic composers were. But no, you have to be an egomaniacal loon at the music aspect, like Stokowski was, for example. Anyway, so he's a non-happening. We'll see where his career goes. Maybe he'll change. You never know. Neville Marriner. This was one of those funny things. Neville Marriner was a terrific musician and, wonderful in music of the Baroque and classical eras. And he founded the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields. And, they made bazillions of terrific recordings of repertoire that wasn't being done because it was really for chamber orchestra. And he inculcated the highest standards of playing. He deserves accolades all over the place. But then he branched out into later music. And like so many people who did the Baroque and classical stuff, he could do the neoclassical stuff, 20th century stuff. Some of it he did extremely well. But, he went to Stuttgart. He was in Minnesota. He did Tchaikovsky. He did Dvorak. He did a Beethoven cycle that was atrocious. He did Respighi tone poems. Oh, my God. Possibly the worst record ever made. They were just appalling. And it just wasn't his thing. It just wasn't his thing. He didn't have the personality for it. He didn't have the charisma. He really didn't. And, people sort of were whispering, well, it was really terrible. I mean, and of course the British press was, forget them. It was absolutely sad to see him do these things. And they were snooze fests. The one romantic thing he did really well was Grieg. He did some beautiful Grieg for Hensler that was superbly well recorded. That was absolutely excellent. But other than that, and I know from the last version of this, the classical period thing we did, that you were all so eager to say, well, he did this one was really good, or that performance was really nice. Yes, everyone has one good performance in them. There are always exceptions. These people can't be dreadful at everything that they do. I mean, they're talented, they're trained, they are experienced. So every so often something's going to click. But we're talking in sort of gross generalities here. And, when you're looking for something nice and romantic, if you see Neville Marriner's name pop up, you're better off choosing someone else. That's the bottom line. Your chances of success will increase markedly. So next, oh, goodness gracious, Mikhail Pletnev. Now, Pletnev, this is really interesting. Pletnev is a tremendous pianist of great flair and personality and he does all kinds of weird things at the piano, freedom and flexibility, and he shows none of that as a conductor. He has two modes as a conductor, generally speaking. Mode number one is completely mechanical, cold, spiritless, and bereft of any kind of idea or feeling. I mean, glacial. Now, that was maybe in his earlier period before he learned how to conduct. I don't know. He made one recording of Tchaikovsky's Pathetique for Virgin that everybody went nuts about. It was very balletic. It wasn't terribly emotionally gripping, but it was very pretty, and that was okay. Then he's done a couple other things. He's largely stuck to Russian repertoire, but he did a Beethoven cycle. Then there's the other Pletnev, the conductor, who is just perverse. And not perverse in the way he's perverse as a pianist. A pianist, you shape the whole phrase, the whole piece. Somehow your perversity can meld into the work itself, and it can all come out okay, maybe somehow, kind of. But when you're dealing with orchestral music, and you've got to get all these people to do the same thing at the same time, the perversity tends to come in indigestible chunks, because they all have to do the same thing at the same time. It usually involves either speeding up or slowing down for a few bars here or there, grotesquely in the wrong place, so that everybody could do it all together. That was his Beethoven cycle. It was just, gosh. But he's not making a lot of records, these days anymore either. But the ones that he did make, oh my gosh, they were strange. There's some just dreadful conducting. And, his boring stuff came out in his Tchaikovsky cycle, which was completely, totally lacking in Tchaikovsky. Emotion, hysteria, the kind of stuff we expect in Tchaikovsky. Next, Daniel Harding. Daniel Harding is another conductor who has a tremendous ability to organize an orchestra and get his point across. The trouble is he doesn't really have a point in romantic music. He's done some good classical stuff. He's done some good other things. But I remember when he first started conducting, he did a disc of Beethoven overtures for Virgin. That was just one of the worst things I ever heard in my life. Since then, he's gone on. He's in Sweden. He's done some Mahler that wasn't bad. He's done a couple things. But Mahler is a composer who can go both ways. You could do Mahler the emotional romantic, or you can do Mahler the modernist. Because there's just so much to do in that music. And so much of it actually kind of plays itself, as long as you don't get in the way of it too badly. So he's done some of that. But essentially, when it's come to music expressive of passion, which is kind of what romantic music is all about, there's a certain level of emotional immediacy there. He hasn't been terribly satisfying, and I'm still waiting to see exactly, how he shapes up, what he turns out to be, and what his real, passion and expertise is, because I don't hear it in his recordings. Nor do I hear it in anything by Andris Nelsons. Oh, has he been a letdown? Poor Boston Symphony. Oh, my goodness. I know you're sticking by your guy, and maybe you should. I don't know. I'm not there day in, day out. But he got an amazing recording contract from Deutsche Grammophon, which gave him an amazing opportunity to do astonishing things with Beethoven, which sucked, in Vienna, of all places. I mean, he just said, okay, guys, Vienna Phil, Beethoven, go. And then he signed his name to the result. I mean, there was nothing there. Bruckner with the Gewandhaus, they gave him these orchestras and said, go, do your thing. Well, there was no thing to do. It was just appallingly uninteresting, totally flat-footed. The Bruckner was awful. And the Shostakovich cycle in Boston, half good, half lousy. Even Shostakovich, something he really does, I mean, that's something he identifies with. And we know he can do superbly well, and he did do some of it superbly well, but it was inconsistent. And I mean, that's not romantic music; it's 20th century, but it's Russian late romantic style, basically. He's been a big letdown, a big letdown in that repertoire, and he had a lot of promise. Maybe he's just done too much too soon. I don't know, but something's happening there, and it ain't good. That's the bottom line. And last but not least, of course, we cannot get out of this category without talking about Pierre Boulez. Now, to his credit, Boulez largely avoided the romantic repertoire. I mean, yeah, he did a Bruckner Eighth. He did some other things like that. He did Mahler from a contemporary perspective as the precursor of the second Viennese school. That was his excuse for getting into it. He did some Richard Strauss. It was just awful. He did Beethoven. Remember Beethoven Fifth in New York? He did Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. Whoa, is that a mistake? He had no feeling for that music. He had no sympathy with the idiom. He was intellectually and aesthetically opposed to everything it stood for, notwithstanding which he would still occasionally dip his toes into it. And, oh, thank God it was only his toes and not the rest of his foot, because he actually was sort of putting his foot in it, wasn't he? He was just there to demonstrate how unsuited he was to that repertoire. And fortunately, there's not too much of it. He was persuaded to do some of it. And, of course, he was good at French music. His Debussy and Ravel was lovely. But that was, technically 20th century music, and it's in an aesthetic which is far removed from the, passionate, romantic, gushing heaps of expressivity, which were certainly not in his arsenal of musical effects. So there you have it, my friends, the 10 worst conductors of music from the Romantic era. Quite an interesting list, I think. And I also think, really, when you get right down to it, a pretty accurate one. But you can come up with your own names and take issue with some of these if you wish. And keep on listening. Thank you so much for joining me, and take care.